author Sam Harris decried the intellectual dark web in his podcast, which was probably the final blow in this rather informal and loosely defined group of political, social commentators. And the main reason for Sam Harris to do that was the role that some of these people identified with the intellectual dark web played during the last US election. For those of you who don't know, and I know that some of you don't, the intellectual dark web was a name coined by the Weinstein brothers around 2017 after the incident involving Brett Weinstein in Evergreen College in Washington State. The term refers to commentators and pundits who claim to be classic liberal free speech absolutists and skeptical and critical of more recent and new theories coming from social sciences and humanities in American academia, especially those that are very influenced by post-structuralism and critical theory. But since the beginning, a major point of contention within this loosely defined group was President Donald Trump. Some of the individuals identified as intellectual dark web are Trump supporters, Dave Rubin probably being the most notable one, while some are avidly anti-Trump, Sam Harris probably being the most notable one. So there was always this disagreement regarding the Trump presidency and what it represents to American democracy. But despite of this big point of disagreement, usually people who were identified as belonging to intellectual dark webs had no problem with being associated together, because one of the points that they celebrate is the fact that they might have disagreements about politics, but they can still work together or fraternize or whatever. Things, however, changed after the last US election.
There are many people in my circle, friends, colleagues, and podcast guests. Many of them are almost exclusively focused on the problem of the far left, and this is causing them to significantly discount the harm that Trump has caused. Some of these people are Trump supporters, but many aren't, and they've been taking the Trump team's allegations that the election was stolen way too seriously. And they're extending a principle of charity to Trump that is frankly delusional. Insofar as I've noticed what others in the so-called intellectual dark web have been saying, it's generally not something I want to be associated with. The IDW was always tongue-in-cheek from my point of view. It was a funny name for a group of people who were willing to discuss difficult topics in public, but it never made sense for us to be grouped together as though we shared a common worldview. I never saw much downside to it, but in the aftermath of this election, with some members of this fictional group sounding fairly bonkers, I just want to make it clear that I'm not part of any group. I only represent myself here.
Now, Sam Harris didn't name anyone on his podcast, but there were three people I think that he was addressing. The first one being Dave Rubin.
Giving us the numbers, telling us the software, saying this amount were deleted, this amount switched from Trump to Biden. That is a pretty direct statement that if he does not have evidence for, that could be the nail in the coffin. Now, I suspect, my suspicion would be that Trump is not an idiot.
I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute. And is there a way we can do something like injection inside or almost a cleaning?
What an idiot. What an idiot.
I don't really need to talk much about Dave Rubin. There are countless videos about him, exposing him as the hack he is. The second one was Brett Weinstein, who has hinted that there are reasons for concern over the election. Actually, there never was any legitimate reason for concern. And the last one was Maajid Nawaz, that I want to talk about in more detail. And I think that was particularly important for Sam Harris to say he's dissociating himself from the intellectual dark web, because he had a very personal relationship with Maajid Nawaz.
I kind of engineered this conversation with Maajid that I thought was initially going to be just a blog post. I got on the phone with him and we just rolled tape and just watched what happened. And we started having such a productive dialogue that I thought we really should write a short book. And it's been a pleasure to collaborate with him. The liberal or regressive liberal pushback against our effort has really been amazingly cynical and ugly. One person on Twitter who has some platform, he talked about what an obscenity it is that a white non-Muslim like me would think that he could write a book about how to reform Islam. And then when someone pointed out that I had a co-author on this book, Maajid, he called Maajid my lapdog. Well, if you read the book, you'll see that if anything, my views and my way of speaking about this problem have been more modified than Maajid's by our collaboration.
But before I actually get to Maajid, I want to make some general points here about this. One of the reasons why people give so little credibility to the intellectual dark web is because a lot of these individuals associate themselves with notable frauds like Dennis Prager.
Nobody has more important things to say than Douglas Murray, who is
Judeo-Christian culture and perhaps a more
ideologues who
upward
claim that all truth is
civilization.
subjective.
Do you believe in
Views
free
overthrowing
speech?
the local
Do you believe that
language
people
and
should be
material-
judged?
Well, one of the most notable members of the intellectual dark web is a fraud himself. And of course you know who I'm talking about. The thing is, for people who claim to be about critical thinking and skepticism, to entertain ideas that have absolutely no good evidence to support them is exceptionally hypocritical. It's contradictory to what you are claiming to be your core values. And the claim of nationwide electoral fraud is a big claim. If you are going to apply Sagan's razor here, it requires an exceptional amount of evidence to support it. There simply wasn't this evidence to entertain this possibility. For example, when Majid Nawaz said this in his radio show,
Tens of thousands of votes were illegally received after 8 p.m. on Tuesday, Election Day, totally and easily changing the results in Pennsylvania and certain other razor-thin states. This is from the sitting president of the most powerful country in the history of the world, which is why it's very important we take it seriously.
this is so disingenuous and manipulative. Like, we're not talking about Thomas Jefferson and John Adams here. It's Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani. Seriously. Majid, he has like an overarching argument here. That all this fraud was caused by the Chinese government because Joe Biden is a Chinese agent. And I'm not even making this up. Let's go to some of his tweets and you'll see what I'm talking about. So this all started with the allegation of the FBI investigation on Hunter Biden and his involvement with a Chinese oil company and Joe Biden supposedly using his influence to help his son getting contracts, whatever. He mentions about the connection between Hunter Biden and Patrick Ho, who was arrested in 2017 after trying to bribe the president of Chad for some oil royalties or something related to that. I don't really see how can that have anything to do with anything, except if you want to make some conspiracy out of it. And this is what Majid is doing. Now this tweet here, he's talking about the regime in China and then talk about the Hunter Biden emails, Joe Biden being on a take for China, but it was a Chinese oil company. It was an oil deal. That's what this is about. It has nothing to do with electoral manipulation. He's trying to say that because the Bidens had this connection with this Chinese oil company, it must mean that the Chinese must be helping with manipulating this election. Like in this other tweet here, he says, part of the problem is that most citizens have little idea how war works. Truth is the first casualty, so plausible allegations of geopolitical interference sound unreal to them. But we know we faced stealth cyber attacks before, or peacetime illusion bubbles need a rethink. The thing is, there is absolutely no evidence of any Chinese manipulation during this election. There isn't. He's trying to make a narrative here that what happened now it's similar to the Russiagate in 2016. It just wasn't. Or if it was, there is no evidence for it. There is no reason to believe that. At this point, this is some crazy fucking QAnon conspiracy nonsense. So everything he sees that he can use as an argument that China is somehow manipulating information, trying to control everything, he uses to make that suggestion. Which makes, China his Illuminati. It's the same shit. Just change Illuminati for China, it's the same fucking shit. And it's kinda sad. Now, regarding the US election fraud, William Barr, just like a few hours before I started recording this video, has already dismissed it and said that there is no evidence for it. So all these people, like Brett Weinstein and Majid Nawaz saying, there was some evidence, there was nothing. Trump lost the election. That's what happened. He lost. Anyway, the thing about it is that the intellectual dark web, anti-woke movement is going kind of the same way that the anti-SJW did. And this is a reason why, despite having quite a few disagreements with Sam Harris, I admire the guy. He doesn't engage in groupthink, he actually challenges his audience. And this is a good thing. And we need more people like him. Now, anyway, I've been Sarah Michel. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.